yourself. Before I let you introduce yourself, a little bit of housekeeping on how we are an ICC preferred provider. So you can, to get your ICC CEUs, you'll get a follow-up course evaluation from Liz. Just fill out the course evaluation and you'll get an ICC CEU certificate. Typically, it works a little better to ask your questions on the Q&A panel on your screen there. You can also type them in on the chat as well. We'll have about 120 people on today, so I won't unmute you, but feel free to type in your questions on Q&A or type them in on the chat. Or afterwards, if you think of something later, send me a question. If I can't answer it, I'd be happy to forward it to Dean. Dean, I like to keep it kind of fun and personal. So when you do introduce yourself, do me a favor and give me one thing personal. Tell me what you like to do for fun. And the floor is yours, Mr. Gamble.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Hopefully you can hear me loud and clear here. Hope you haven't set the expectation too high by calling me smart. We'll see how the audience reacts to the presentation today. Let's see. Something fun that I like to do for fun. I used to like to travel to other places, which has been a habit I have not been able to enjoy for a couple of months now. Instead, I'm enjoying the views out my window every day, which is getting a little old, but I feel lucky to be healthy and working. So I'll take that. As Jason mentioned, I'm the technical manager for the Energy Star Certified Homes program, and I'm excited to be giving this webinar to Sphere today. I've interacted with Sphere over the years, and it's a great organization. Texas is a big state and for Energy Star homes. It's one way you can demonstrate code compliance. And Oklahoma, we've had some really strong partners there as well for the program. So hopefully this will be of interest and value to you guys. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So we're just going to start with two quick poll questions that Jason's going to help me out with. Just want a sense of who's on the call today. Are you a home energy rater or provider? Are you a builder? Are you an HVAC contractor? Are you part of a utility program? Or are you another party, such as a code official?
Yeah, I added city inspector plan reviewer as a separate category on the poll, Dean,
Great.
because I just knew that would be where most of our folks fall into the category. Can you see the poll as well on your screen there, Dean, or no?
I cannot see it. Hopefully everyone else can.
I'll share it. It's basically, it looks like about 75% city inspector or plan reviewer, 10% home energy rater provider, 2% HVAC contractor, 2% utility program, 5% architect engineer, and 12% other. Okay, sounds good. So that might sway this question for the second question a little bit, the answers here, but for those who are involved with residential new construction, are you certifying some or all of your homes to Energy Star, or are you aware of those, that you're inspecting are Energy Star certified? Are you not certifying homes, but you're doing a HERS rating or an ERI rating on those homes? Or are you not involved with either doing Energy Star nor doing HERS or ERI ratings? Let's go ahead and see what the audience says here. Yeah, for some reason that second poll's not wanting to launch. Relaunch polling.
Okay.
Boom, boom. HVAC contractor polls. That is weird. For some reason, it's not wanting to let me launch the second poll question. So I apologize.
That's all right.
I just have to skip the second one. Sorry about that.
We only get one question per webinar.
There you go.
Not a problem. Well, that's good. Knowing that there are so many code officials and inspectors on, I'll try to speak a little bit to that audience. And if there are questions, definitely we can have those come in and I can clarify things as we go along. So let me go ahead and start with a little bit of context. So I'm going to rewind 15 years to version 2 of the Energy Star program. Energy Star has been around for quite some time. And at that time, under our performance path, you had to do a HERS rating and you had to meet a performance target. And it's pretty amazing to think, for those that are familiar with the HERS score or the ERI scores, those targets used to be a HERS 80 or HERS 85, depending on where you were in the country. So we've come a long way since version 2, 15 years ago. And on top of that, you had to do some mandatory features in addition to the score. You had to have tight ducts. You had to use some Energy Star lighting and appliances. You had to complete a one-page thermal bypass checklist. And lots of people could do this. If you were already doing a HERS rating, it just took a little bit more to do Energy Star, and lots of people took that extra step. Then about 10 years ago came version 3 of our program, and you still had to do a good HERS rating based on the Energy Star reference design, which is a prescriptive set of measures that you're benchmarked against. You still had to do the thermal bypass checklist in the form of what we call the thermal enclosure system rater checklist. But the rest got more complicated. You had to do a lot of things that were just for the Energy Star program. So just for Energy Star, you had to measure total duct leakage, you had to put in a ventilation system, do bedroom pressure balancing, check the filter, you had to pay attention to combustion safety. You had to collect the HVAC design report and the HVAC commissioning checklist just for Energy Star. And when we first launched version 3, you had to collect as a rater the water management system checklist for every home. So this was a big lift. It was not easy for our program or for our partners. Here I was in 2010, young and youthful, just at the launch of version 3, and look at how much I've aged since then. It's been a dramatic decline. Slightly doctored photo there, but it has been stressful again for us and for our partners with all these new requirements. And really a lot of the challenges were related to those HVAC requirements. And for partners who were overwhelmed by our HVAC requirements, they could just turn away from Energy Star and avoid them altogether, even though these requirements are really important. So for example, for raters, this required them to learn brand new skills that they could only put to use on Energy Star homes, and it added time to every job. That was harder to justify since it didn't have any impact on their HERS score. For builders who were less knowledgeable about HVAC, they didn't see the potential for reduced comfort complaints and better durability. Plus, those who really cared about their HERS score didn't see any bump in their performance. And for utilities, because this wasn't baked into the savings estimates, it was harder for them to justify paying incentives for these measures, unless they did their own custom savings calculations, and that was pretty burdensome. Now, it wasn't all bad. The partners who stuck with the program over the last 10 years have made huge strides on HVAC. We've really come a long way. So our partners, meaning our builders and our home energy raters, they're much more familiar with HVAC design and installation than they were 10 years ago. Our partners in the program have a stronger relationship with HVAC contractors now. I mean, 10 years ago, we probably would say that most raters didn't even know who the HVAC contractor was for the job. And now they're an integral part of the process. Many partners have seen total duct leakage drop a lot in the last 10 years. Texas was already pretty good in this area, and I would say Oklahoma probably was as well. But this has been a big challenge for other parts of the country. And many raters and providers have actually started to integrate HVAC design and commissioning into their business. So they're actually becoming the experts now on these particular requirements. Yet at the end of the day, despite some of these great strides, we saw that version 3 of the Energy Star program, and particularly the HVAC requirements, divided our world into two. It kind of divided it into Energy Star on one side and HERS and ERI ratings on the other side. And that was never our intention. So for this reason, we've been working really hard to bridge these two worlds through our revision process, which is kind of a continuous maintenance process. So what have we done? We've reduced the rater tasks by 1/3 to make it easier to certify homes. We've removed the requirement to collect the water management system checklist and the HVAC commissioning checklist. So that reduces the amount of paperwork. We helped automate filling out the HVAC design report with the press of a button. So for those that are using HVAC design software programs like Elite or like RightSoft, they can now, the HVAC designer can really easily fill out these design reports. And most importantly, we've led the development of a new standard. It's called Standard 310, and it's ACCA and RESNET's upcoming standard for HVAC grading. Now, all of these pieces have been important, but this last piece, HVAC grading, will be the most consequential of them all. And with this last piece, we think we can create a whole new world, or maybe a new whole world, one where the difference between a HERS rating and Energy Star is so much smaller. And it'll be so much easier for builders to step up from a good HERS rating to Energy Star certification. So you can see that I have big expectations for this HVAC rating standard. And so next I need to tell you a little bit more about what that standard is. This upcoming standard is called Standard 310, and again, it's a standard for grading the installation of HVAC systems. This is a visual overview of the standard. It consists of 5 key tasks that have to be completed in sequence. And for each task, you have to meet a certain threshold in order to proceed to the next task. So the first task is a design review. If the design falls within specified tolerances, then you can proceed to the next task. Otherwise, you stop here. If you have a really terrible design, then there's no point in checking to see if the installation matches that terrible design, right? So that's why that's important. The second task is a total duct leakage test. And the results of this test will be assigned a grade of 1 or 2, meaning it's great or it's okay, or grade 3, which is pretty bad. And if you get grade 1 or 2 in the green box, then you can proceed. Otherwise, you have to stop here. The third task is to measure the blower fan airflow using one of 4 methods. This also results in a grade of 1, 2, or 3. And if you achieve grade 1 or 2, you can proceed to the next task. Otherwise, you stop here. The fourth task is to measure the blower fan watt draw. And we provide 3 methods for doing the test, and you're again graded. In this case, you don't have to achieve grade 1 or 2 to proceed. That's because the watt draw won't impact the 5th and final task, which has to do with refrigerant charge. And for this 5th and final task, we've offered 2 non-invasive methods for assessing the refrigerant charge. And it's important to point out that you can only get grade 1, meaning good, or grade 3, meaning bad, for this particular task. And we'll talk about why that is a little bit later in the presentation. So this is Standard 310 in a nutshell. If I had to stop the entire webinar right here, this would give you a decent sense of what the standard is. But since we have some more time, let's go ahead and discuss the details. So task 1, again, is evaluating the design of the forced air system. And this should look pretty familiar to our Energy Star partners because we have a design review already built into the Energy Star program. The first step of this is for the rater to collect design documentation for the dwelling and the HVAC system that's being tested. For our Energy Star partners, this documentation will be slightly expanded from what you collect today, but it's not radically different. For example, you'll get a few more data points like internal gains, plus some characteristics of all the HVAC systems in the dwelling. The second step is to review that documentation to make sure it's complete and to compare it to the dwelling. And key features must fall within the defined tolerances. And some examples are shown here. So for the code officials on the call today, you may not be familiar with this design review in the Energy Star world, but the raters are asked to do things like look at the floor area that was used in the design and see if it's close to the floor area in the actual home that was constructed. Same with the window area. They look at the outdoor design temperatures that were used in the design and make sure it's falling within a certain limit for that county. And so this sort of design review that's built into Energy Star has been expanded and formalized in this new HVAC rating standard. If the tolerances are met, you can proceed to the next task. Otherwise, you stop here and you can't earn any credit. Okay, so 1 task down. The next task is to evaluate the total duct leakage. And this is really straightforward. It's about a page long in the standard, and it should also look really familiar for Energy Star Homes partners. The procedure simply directs the rater to measure the total duct leakage according to a different RESNET standard, which is also referenced in the IECC, which is called Standard 380, evaluate the results, and assign a grade. The total leakage limits are shown here, and they're dependent on when the testing is done, either rough-in or final, and the number of returns in the system, either less than or equal to or greater than 3. And you'll see that grade 1 aligns with the current Energy Star program requirements. So it's quite achievable, we know, in about 100,000 homes per day, because that's 100,000 homes per year, because that's how many Energy Star homes are being certified around the country each year. Grade 2 is a little bit more tolerant than that, so higher leakage. And grade 3 is beyond that. So if grade 1 or 2 is achieved, then you can proceed to the next task. Otherwise, you can't earn any points and you stop here. Okay, on to task 3, measuring the blower fan airflow. And this will be a new test for most, but not all, home energy raters. So the goal here is to measure the total airflow going through what we call the blower fan. That's the big fan that's in the furnace or in the heat pump on the inside of the house. And there are 4 test methods you can choose from: a flow hood, a flow grid, pressure matching, or the OEM static pressure table method. Each method is going to have its pros and its cons, but this gives a rater some different options and some flexibility to pick the method that works the best for them. Now, key point here is that we're just measuring basically a single measurement for most homes where you're getting all of the air that's going through the system. This is not a test where you have to go and measure the airflow out of every supply register and then add those all up. That would be a lot more time intensive. And the result is then compared to the design airflow. And the closer you are to that design, the better. And this is really important because if your airflow doesn't match the design, then both the capacity of your HVAC system and the efficiency of the HVAC system will be degraded. This is why we really care about this in the Energy Star program and in the standard. You want to make sure that the installed airflow is close to the design. This is used to assign a grade of 1, 2, or 3, meaning good, okay, or bad. And as long as you get grade 1 or 2, you can proceed to the next task. Otherwise, you stop here. Okay, 3 tasks down and 2 to go. Next up is measuring and evaluating the blower fan watt draw. Now, the blower fan watt draw is basically how much power that big main air moving fan in the furnace or the heat pump inside is using. It can use hundreds of watts of power, but in ratings today, that's not even measured. And so for this task, there are 3 procedures to choose from. The first is a plug-in watt meter, second is a clamp-on watt meter, and the third is using the house's utility meter. Now, using the measured airflow from that last task and the measured watt draw from this task, we can calculate how efficient the blower fan is operating. And that's used to assign a grade of 1, 2, or 3. So the more efficient that fan is, the better the grade is going to be. Now, regardless of the grade, you can proceed to the next task. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. That's it for task 4. And the 5th and final task is evaluating the refrigerant charge. So here we have 2 methods for doing this. The first is what we call the non-invasive method, which measures the performance of the equipment during operation. And the second is the weigh-in verification method, which is more of a paperwork review. And I want to go one layer deeper on these procedures since they're going to be pretty new to our raters and our builders and pretty much almost everyone in the industry. So let's discuss the non-invasive method first. By non-invasive, what we mean is that no gauges are connected directly to the refrigerant system. That means there's no risk of contaminating the refrigerant or changing the charge of the system. This is a really important feature of this test method. Instead, what the rater is doing is using the temperature of the air and the temperature of the refrigerant lines to assess the charge. Now, this procedure is really intended to triage systems and separate those that are performing okay from those that are not. For that reason, the method results in either grade 1, meaning the charge is basically okay, or grade 3, meaning it's basically not okay. There's no grade 2 performance here like there is for the other tasks. Now, this method is not intended to replace the more invasive procedures used by a contractor when they're charging a system, like superheat or subcooling. Instead, it's providing a non-invasive method for the purpose of a home energy rating that triages the system. And the weigh-in verification method is a second option. It can be used year-round, and it has to be used under certain conditions, like when it's too hot or too cold outside, and for mini or multi-split systems. And this method is more of a document review than a true performance test. So my preference is on that non-invasive test on the last slide, but this is the only method available for certain circumstances. Okay, so I know that probably very few are doing that refrigerant charge test today. Some of the other tasks that we talked about are probably much more familiar to home energy raters and builders today. But to come full circle here, I want to put up this slide again showing the 5 tasks we just walked through. We believe that each one is practical and achievable for a rater to incorporate into their ratings. And in fact, we're not the only ones who believe these tasks are practical and achievable. We enlisted the help of 6 providers around the country for a test drive, and they evaluated 18 systems, and they performed 63 individual tests. And the purpose was to get these providers to give these field procedures in standard 310 a quick spin. So they didn't get a ton of training. They just got a quick introductory call. They got some slides, a lot like this presentation. They got a draft of the standard, and we just turned them loose and said, see what happens. So what did they find? Well, let's first talk about how long these tests take to do. To conduct the test, you first have to let the HVAC system warm up for about 15 minutes, but the expectation is that the rater can be doing other tasks in the home during this runtime. Our provider found that on average, after that 15-minute warm-up, it took about 26 minutes to conduct the 3 required tests: the blower fan airflow, the blower fan watt draw, and the non-invasive refrigerant charge test. Among the participants, though, the total time ranged from as little as 15 minutes to as much as 40 minutes. And so we think this is a little bit on the high end because this is the first time they were attempting to do these tests. And most of the participants, these were largely Energy Star homes that they were doing these tests on, most of the participants found that the systems were grade 1, which is the blue portion of these charts. About a quarter of the airflow and the watt draw tests were grade 2, shown in yellow. That means that they'd still receive some partial credit. They're okay, but not great. And then a small minority of the airflow and watt draw were grade 3, which means that they wouldn't lose any points, but they wouldn't earn any either. Those are the orange slices there. Okay. So that should give you a basic sense of what standard 310 will bring. Even though we still have some work to put the finishing touches on the standard, we're getting close enough that we can envision how it will integrate with the Energy Star Homes program. And revision 10, which is the kind of continuous maintenance release that we released last November, you can see that we have HVAC grading mentioned for the first time. In fact, revision 10 is a bit of a choose your own adventure. So in this journey, you have 2 paths. You have what we call path A, the HVAC grading path. And if you follow this new path, all of your HVAC design and installation requirements for the Energy Star Homes program will be built upon this new standard. Or you can choose path B. So this is a well-worn, familiar path. We're calling it the HVAC credential path, but this is the path that our partners have been on for the last 10 years. This is the one that requires a credentialed HVAC contractor who completes the HVAC commissioning checklist. And for each home that's certified, our partners will be able to choose which of these paths they want to do, path A or path B. This is really important because if you're not ready to step up to this new HVAC rating path right now, no sweat, you can stick with path B. But if you like the idea of this HVAC grading standard and you want to pursue this new path and the potential it unlocks, then you can go for it. So either answer is acceptable. So now I want to explore these 2 paths in a bit more detail, and I'm actually going to start with path B, since that's the one that's more familiar to our partners today. That's what they've been doing. And for the code officials, this will give you a sense of what sort of HVAC requirements have been built into the Energy Star program for the last 10 years. So in this path, the HVAC designer starts by completing the Energy Star HVAC design report. The rater then collects that report and reviews it according to what we call the Energy Star Rater Design Review checklist. The rater also verifies that the HVAC contractor working on the home is a credentialed contractor, credentialed by either ACCA or Advanced Energy. And then in the field, the credentialed contractor is responsible for installing the system, and they complete the HVAC commissioning checklist, which covers some similar tasks to what we just talked about in the standard, an airflow test and a refrigerant charge test. The rater then comes in and they measure static pressure. And finally, the rater is permitted but not required to collect that HVAC commissioning checklist. So you've reached the end of path B. This is the path that every partner is on today for the Energy Star program. So let's see how this compares to path A. First, the HVAC designer will still complete an HVAC design report, but rather than being specific to the Energy Star program, it will be a design report that's compliant with this new HVAC rating standard, standard 310. So any HERS rated or ERI rated home could use this report, but if you're doing it for Energy Star, you'll have a small Energy Star supplement to capture a few additional items. As a rater, you'll still complete the rater design review checklist, but when it comes to the HVAC design review, almost this entire review will happen in accordance with standard 310. So instead of us listing out every single review requirement in the Energy Star program, we'll just point you to standard 310 instead. One thing you won't need to do under this path is check to see if the contractor is credentialed. That's because regardless of who does the work, the rater is the one who will be assessing the installation using standard 310 for the purpose of the rating. Okay, so hopefully this is making sense so far. You can see that this is a new path, but it's a pretty familiar path in terms of how this is going to proceed. Now let's talk about what happens in the field. Of course, the contractor still needs to install the system properly. Then, as we've discussed, the rater will come in and they'll complete 4 tasks as part of Standard 310. The first one is the total duct leakage test, which they're already doing for every Energy Star home today. So that's really no different, other than getting a grade from it. The other 3 tasks will be new for our program: the blower fan airflow, the blower fan watt draw, and the refrigerant charge test. And not only will the rater have to complete these tasks, the equipment will have to be decently installed for the home to be Energy Star certified. So specifically, you'll have to get grade 1 or 2 airflow, you'll have to get grade 1 or 2 watt draw, and you'll have to get grade 1 refrigerant charge. Now we're allowing grade 1 or 2 for airflow and watt draw for now until we learn what's achievable. If a few years from now we discover that grade 1 is within reach for every Energy Star home, we might tighten up this tolerance. And for refrigerant charge, remember there's only grade 1 or grade 3. And so that's why we're requiring grade 1 for this parameter. But there is an important caveat. That's why I have the asterisk there. Remember earlier I said that there are 2 methodologies for assessing this: the non-invasive method, which is a performance test, and the weigh-in method, which is primarily a document review. And that's the only option for extreme outdoor temperatures and for mini splits. Because I am capable of learning, I don't want to subject our partners to a new document collection requirement, because that was really challenging. And so for that reason, we're only going to require grade 1 refrigerant charge for homes where the non-invasive performance test can be done during final inspection. If the home only has mini splits or the outdoor temperatures are too extreme to do that performance test, then our partners will have 2 choices. They can either take a default of grade 3, or they can pursue grade 1 through the document review and they can get extra HERS and ERI points. Either way, they'll be able to certify the home. So does this mean you never have to evaluate refrigerant charge to certify a home under Energy Star? No. It means if you can do the performance test, then you have to assess refrigerant charge and achieve grade 1 for the home to be certified. Okay, so that's path A. Just to compare the 2 paths side by side, first, the designer is completing the design report. For the HVAC grading path, it will be the standard 310 design report plus an Energy Star supplement. Well, for path B, that's a Energy Star HVAC design report. In both cases, the rater will complete the rater design review checklist, but in path A, they'll do the comparison primarily using standard 310, whereas in path B, they'll do that design review according to our Energy Star specific checklist requirements. Also, just in path B, the rater will need to verify that the contractor is credentialed. So now let's move into the field. The HVAC contractor will install the equipment in path A, and in path B, they'll also install the equipment, but they'll have to complete the HVAC commissioning checklist. For the rater, in both cases, they'll complete the rater field checklist, but in path A, they'll complete the total duct leakage test and the 3 new field tasks, and they'll have to achieve specific grades. Whereas in path B, they'll also verify total duct leakage limits, but then they'll measure the static pressure, and they'll have the option of collecting the HVAC commissioning checklist. So again, for the inspectors and code officials who are kind of coming up to speed with what the program requires, path B is what people have been doing for the last 10 years in our program, and path A is this new option that will become available soon. And how does this actually look in our program documents? You'll see a short explanation of what each path means, and then the 2 paths are presented and the requirements for each of those are listed. For the rater design review checklist, you'll see path A on the front and you'll see path B on the back. You can see path A is a lot shorter because we're simply referencing the design review criteria in standard 310 instead of listing out everything ourselves. And on the rater field checklist, in section 5, you'll see it's been broken out into path A and path B. In path A, you're grading the equipment, and in path B, that's what the requirements are today. Checking the equipment model number and manufacturer, measuring the static pressure, and having the option to collect the HVAC commissioning checklist. Okay, so that's the HVAC grading standard and how it'll integrate into the Energy Star program. So let's continue. I want to basically end with highlighting the top 3 ways that our program, the Energy Star Certified Homes program, is going to be improved by this new standard. Number 1, it will not require the use of a credentialed contractor. So one persistent challenge we've had since the launch of version 3 of our Energy Star program 10 years ago is that in smaller markets where there are fewer Energy Star homes being certified, it has been more difficult for our partners to find a credentialed HVAC contractor. With a flat annual fee of about $600 for that credential, as long as you're working on 25 homes or more per year, that's pretty low overhead. But if you're just doing 1 or 2 homes a year, that is a bigger lift for the contractor. And to be clear, this isn't unique to HVAC contractors. It's also harder to find HERS raters in smaller markets. And it doesn't mean that there aren't good contractors in these markets. It means that it's harder for them to justify being part of a quality assurance credential program with a fixed cost when they're just working on 1 or 2 homes. In the end, the credential requirement does add an additional hurdle to certification in some markets. And on top of that, it was really challenging to create an efficient feedback loop between the contractors and the home energy raters. At the beginning of version 3, when we first launched the program, the rater had to collect the completed HVAC commissioning checklist for every single home. But the pure logistics of that were deadly. It was just really hard to get that piece of paper from the HVAC contractor into the hands of the rater. And on top of that, the information that the rater received was not very actionable. It was hard to get information back to the contractor, good or bad. So with HVAC grading, all of this changes. Of course, we still need contractors to properly install the HVAC system, but the cost of the credential no longer needs to be an excuse for not certifying homes. And now the raters can do a basic assessment of the installation quality themselves using standard procedures for the purpose of the rating. This creates a feedback loop that's really similar to the duct leakage to outside test that they're doing today. The duct installer is typically responsible for sealing the ducts. The rater comes in with a standard procedure to measure duct leakage, and they can use that information to create a feedback loop. They can say, hey, you've got tight ducts, great job. Or, sorry, your ducts aren't tight. If you can fix that, then I can give you credit. So this is a big deal. It solves a lot of problems. The second way that the HVAC grading standard improves Energy Star is that it rewards properly installed HVAC equipment with ERI and HERS points. And these points will be available not just for Energy Star homes, but also for homes that are just getting a standard HERS or ERI rating. And it's a little dangerous to boil everything down to points, but there's no denying that a few extra points can be a huge motivator for builders. And in this case, they're well deserved. Studies have shown that poorly installed air conditioners and heat pumps are common. Nearly 50% of systems in studies have had improper airflow, and incorrect refrigerant charge is found in 60 to 80% of systems. So this is a really pervasive issue. And these poorly installed systems operate less efficiently than properly installed ones. So consider a builder who's paid extra to get a 16-SEER air conditioner, but they're getting something closer to the performance of a 14-SEER system because of poor installation. Today, that's not reflected at all in a HERS score or an ERI rating. After HVAC grading is implemented, it will. And a builder may very well decide that it's more cost-effective to install a 14-SEER system properly than to pay for a 16-SEER system that's poorly installed. This helps send an important signal to our partners that properly installed equipment is a really good investment. Also, consider tax credits. Once HVAC rating is incorporated into a standard rating, builders may be able to capture tax credits more easily from the extra savings that are generated. Builders are going to get a bonus on top of the improved efficiency, and that is better capacity. That means that the 3-ton system they paid for will actually deliver 3 tons of capacity rather than 2.9 tons or 2.8 tons from a poorly installed system. And efficiency is great, but eliminating a comfort complaint or extending equipment life or managing humidity better because you have this extra capacity, that is priceless. And it's not only builders who should care about this. With HVAC rating, utility programs will be able to incentivize and claim credit for proper installation right within the rating programs. No extra calcs are required. HVAC manufacturers will have a reason to add features that make installation easier to do and to verify. Raters will have a valuable new service to offer to make this all happen. not just for Energy Star builders, but for anyone doing an energy rating. But most importantly, for Energy Star, it means that the stuff our builders have been doing for the last 10 years will finally get extra credit in an energy rating. So for the builder who is paying extra for a 16-SEER air conditioner, they may be able to trade that off for the grade 1 installation they've been doing all along and a lower cost of compliance to meet our program requirements. So that is a big deal as well. And last but definitely not least, HVAC rating integrates most Energy Star HVAC requirements into a standard energy rating. So let's revisit this painful slide from the beginning of my presentation. Since the release of version 3, we've already converted those water management system requirements from a checklist the rater has to collect into a set of requirements that the builder or the developer are responsible for. So there's no more paperwork collection associated with that. Using Path A, this new HVAC rating path for Energy Star, what else goes away? Well, the Energy Star HVAC commissioning checklist, that goes away because now you're verifying the installation quality through the rater for the purpose of the rating. So the rater no longer needs to collect that. The HVAC contractor would no longer need to fill that out. What else? We no longer need the Energy Star HVAC design report because instead that's becoming an industry standard 310 HVAC design report, which you can do as part of a standard energy rating and then just add that small Energy Star supplement. Now let's turn to the rater field checklist, or the rater design review checklist. Now it just shrinks to 4 items. And that's because most of the design review becomes part of the standard energy rating. For Energy Star, you just need to make sure the builder is a partner, verify that the specified insulation and windows are good enough, and check that the equipment is not oversized. And finally, we'll have the rater field checklist. So you still have the thermal enclosure system on the front, but on the back using the HVAC rating path. That will take care of total duct leakage requirements in the equipment model check. It also eliminates the need to measure static pressure. And you no longer need to optionally collect the HVAC commissioning checklist. So you can see just how much more streamlined our program becomes. So where does this all leave us? Almost all of Energy Star, after HVAC rating goes into effect, becomes a good energy rating with specific features locked in. You have to meet our performance target, meaning that we define a specific HERS and ERI target that you have to meet for the home to be certified. You have to do that with insulation R values and window performance minimums to protect comfort. You have to do that with grade 1 insulation installation in most cases. You have to do that with grade 1 or 2 HVAC installation. And you have to have tight insulated ducts, right? So even without picking up the Energy Star program requirements, just doing what you'd probably consider to be a good energy rating is getting you most of the way to Energy Star certification. So what's left? On top of the efficiency that's locked in by that good rating, we're just adding a handful of extra features. We're adding 2 comfort features. The first is a complete thermal enclosure system. Basically, the thermal bypass checklist, which we know from version 2 of our program 15 years ago, you can do. And essentially, all of this has been integrated into code by now, so there's no excuse not to do that. The second feature is bedroom comfort vents, like a transfer grill, to ensure that you don't have air trapped in the bedroom and prevent it from getting back to the HVAC system. We're adding 4 air quality features, a whole house fresh air system, which is critical for high performance homes, and is now required by nearly half of all states in every new home. Kitchen and bath fans that work well, meaning that they move enough air to be effective, and they actually exhaust air to the outside, go figure. A MER 6 or better filter that's properly installed. And combustion safety, which comes in a few different flavors, either power vented or direct vent appliances, or combustion safety testing, or no combustion inside the home's pressure boundary, like using electric appliances. And we're adding 1 key durability feature, the water management system. Now, almost all of these details are baked into code already as well. But again, it's super important for high performance homes to get these water management details right. Builders should actually be more concerned about this 1 durability feature than anything else we do in the Energy Star program, because leaks, and other moisture issues can be so damaging. And in fact, many of our builders in the Energy Star program go above and beyond our minimum requirements, for example, by having third-party assessments done on their homes.
I tell raters that all the time. Sorry to interrupt, Dean, but just even if you aren't going through Energy Star, you know, if you're just out there doing an insulation inspection for your builder and you notice that the flashing is installed backwards, or they don't have the head flashing done correctly at the window details, or I mean, literally it would just take you seconds of observation, another few seconds to text a picture to your builder. You're adding value to the builder. I mean, what's the number one reason builders get dragged into court? Water intrusion issues and the problems that they cause, right? And ultimately at Spear, yeah, I'm worried about, you know, getting people to understand the energy code and saving energy. But if a house rots 30 years after it's built because of moisture and water intrusion issues, I even just thought, even if they aren't Energy Star partners, for inspectors and especially the raters on the line, just think about this slide and what Dean's talking about here. And even if you aren't, you know, necessarily getting paid for it from your builder, just adding that value to your builder will certainly make that next cost increase that you need a little more palatable for him. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. And so just to reiterate, a lot of what we have in the water management system requirements actually comes directly from code. So really all that we've done in the Energy Star program is taken what can be sort of a dense set of requirements spread out over many pages in code, and we've consolidated that onto a single page. And so if you just run through that one-page checklist on any particular home, you're helping them, you know, satisfy code requirements, and then, like Jason is saying, hopefully avoid some really potentially disastrous leaks down the line. Okay, so that's it. You can fit Energy Star features on one page. It's a good energy rating done the right way, with 2 added comfort features, 4 indoor air quality features, and a set of durability details. So this gets us a lot closer to the simplicity of version 2 of our program 15 years ago. I mean, just ask yourself, which of these features would you tell your builder or your client or the home, you know, the builder of the home that you're inspecting to leave out? Which would you leave out of your own home? And think about how hard and expensive it would be to add any of these features after the time of construction. We really think that what this boils down to is something that any builder should strive for. And that's really what Energy Star is designed to be, something that's ready for broad adoption by builders, whether it's a production builder, a custom builder, a starting home, a move-up home, a luxury home. It's really designed to fit everyone's goals. So let me just wrap things up here, and then we can turn it over to questions. Just to reiterate some of these key points. So Standard 310 is a new standard. It's an ACCA, RESNET, ANSI standard that will be used for evaluating the design and installation quality of HVAC systems, and is really designed to work within the context of a HERS rating or an ERI rating. It will allow homes doing a HERS or ERI rating to get new points for properly installed HVAC systems. So that's going to be of interest to a lot of builders. If you want to read the essentially final draft of Standard 310, you can visit the link that's here. We're expecting that it will be a formal ANSI-approved standard next month. You can review revision 10 of the Energy Star program to understand how we've incorporated HVAC rating into our program requirements. That's the Path A, Path B thing that we talked about. Again, the standard should be finalized next month. And really the rest of this year, 2020, we'll be building out some extra pieces to support the standard. So training, we'll be working with the HVAC software design companies to integrate this new HVAC design report into their software. And so we'll probably see some early adopters start using this in like late July, August, but it's going to be more ready for a typical user towards the end of this calendar year. In the end, we think the Energy Star plus HVAC rating is going to create a whole new world by mainstreaming a lot of the HVAC requirements that we've been requiring for the last 10 years. So let me leave my contact information here, and I think, Jason, if there are questions that have come in, I don't think I can see them, but if you want to read them off, then I can.
Yeah, I'll read them to you. I just, you get so much more with an Energy Star home. I just love how you take all those, because you know, as a recovering building official, you can get lost in some of those drainage and flashing and stuff details, and that y'all consolidate that, put it on a list, have it verified. I mean, I think it's more and more apparent how much more you're getting with an Energy Star home versus a code home. So thanks for what you do, Dean, and really great presentation. We do have about 10 questions that have come in, and we've got about 15 minutes, so that's perfect.
Great.
One is related to are you familiar with the ACCA Residential System Design Review Form? And they're curious if it aligns at all with the design review checklist in Energy Star.
Yeah, well, let me talk through that. So ACCA already had a quality installation standard called QI5 or 5QI, and that was really focused on contractors and doing all the things that a contractor should do to properly install an HVAC system. It's a good standard. And so when we were first designing the HVAC requirements for Energy Star 10 years ago, that was a standard that we pulled from, and a subset of those requirements made it into the Energy Star program. This new HVAC grading standard we talked about today, again, it's partially an ACCA standard as well. So they were involved with this process. But again, we're pulling a subset of the requirements from that QI5 standard that raters can do, knowing that they typically won't have an HVAC license. And so they're limited in certain things that they can and can't do. And so it's a subset of that. So anyone that's doing that other standard is going to be well positioned to install their systems properly. The rater is really using this standard to demonstrate compliance with those installation requirements for the context of a HERS rating. So hopefully that answers your question.
It did. And I apologize. I have fire trucks outside. I'm going to ask the question and hit mute. These two kind of go together. Why wouldn't an HVAC contractor commission their systems? And do you need to commission a system in winter if it's installed in summer or vice versa?
Okay, great questions. So why wouldn't the contractor commission their own systems? A lot of them do, and that's great. You kind of want to know if it's working or not. But there have been some real challenges with getting proper commissioning. One is that it's a very price-sensitive market, especially for new construction. And so the faster you can install a system and move on, typically the better it is. And one challenge that we've had, even in the Energy Star program, is that it's hard to know if it's been properly installed and commissioned or not. It doesn't look different necessarily. And even if you're having comfort complaints, that's probably the most likely way that you're going to know that something is off. But even then, it's hard to tie. Is that a manufacturing defect? Is it an installation defect? And so it was so opaque to kind of figure out if it's commissioned or not. A lot of contractors could get away with not checking how well their systems were installed, and no one would know the difference. Even builders are typically not educated about what you should commission. Is it the airflow? Is it the voltage? Is it the refrigerant charge? And so really what we're trying to do with this standard is mainstream some of those key commissioning tasks. So it makes it more transparent and provides a carrot to do this. The other question was, do you have to come back and commission something in the winter or in the summer if it's being installed in the winter? No. It's been designed so that you can do all the work you need to do at the time of installation. And that's the main reason that we have these two different methods in the refrigerant charge section. One of those methods is a paper review. And that paper review is really intended if you're trying to assess an air conditioner in the middle of winter. You can't turn it on. It's not going to work. It's going to freeze the coil. And so you have to do basically a paperwork review that's based on how much refrigerant was added or removed from the system during startup.
Okay. The old carrot instead of the stick. That's probably a smarter approach. Good job. Do code and Energy Star meet regarding ventilation, i.e. Verifying the ECM motor requirement if the blower fan's used for whole house ventilation?
So Energy Star does require that as a subset of our Energy Star specific program requirements. And so that should be taken care of in our program. This new HVAC rating standard doesn't really address that explicitly, that requirement. Instead, it's focused on how efficiently the HVAC fan is actually operating. So a little bit related, but different, distinct from that ECM requirement. I will say that the HVAC design report, this standardized HVAC design report, which is basically one page front and back that we're working on developing as part of Standard 310, one of the fields on that standard design report is the fan type. Is it a PSC motor? Is it an ECM motor? Or is it a different type? So you could look at that design report for someone doing this and see if they're using an ECM motor.
It wouldn't necessarily catch it for code, but it is available in there, is what you're basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. On the blower fan watt draw test on like a ECM or a variable speed, or what speed, does it specify what speed? I'm assuming on high, or what is it at?
Yeah, it's on high. And so we basically have some details in the procedure for setting up the house and the system before you start the test to basically let it ramp up to the maximum speed before you begin the test. And that's one of the reasons we need like 15 minutes of warm up time for the system, because some systems that are multi-speed will like run for 5 minutes and kind of evaluate it. And then if like high call for cooling comes in, then it will ramp up to a higher speed after initial period. So we kind of need it to get up to that maximum speed before we start testing.
Okay, makes sense. How many HERS points is it worth, and do they correspond 1-to-1 with ERI?
Okay, so the short answer is, like, if I had to give you some ballpark numbers, because it's going to be a little different for every home. If you take an Energy Star home in Texas and you install your system perfectly, for an air conditioner, you'd probably be getting about 3 extra points in the hottest climates, like, south of San Antonio and maybe up to Houston. You maybe get 2 points in the northern part of the state. And it's kind of 2 points for the rest of the country we're talking about. It's about 2 points in mixed climates. It's about 1 point in cold climates for an air conditioner. If you're installing a heat pump, that's going to be running a lot more often because it's obviously running in both heating and cooling modes. And so there you have the potential for about 3 to 4 points across the country if it's perfectly installed. That should give you a ballpark. In terms of, is it 1-for-1 between HERS and ERI? The short answer is yeah. There are some differences between the HERS version of the ERI standard and the ERI standard that's referenced by code. So that gets like a little bit more complicated in terms of the answer, but the short version is basically, yeah, it's 1-for-1.
That's my short answer when I get asked about HERS and ERI too. How does a contractor go about getting credentialed, and could they use this certification on a non-Energy Star home?
Sure. So the credential, let's see, I'm trying to think of the best way to get you to the right spot. Maybe just follow up with me by email so I can give you the link. So both ACCA and Advanced Energy run the credentialed contractor program, and they provide a basic orientation for their program and what Energy Star requires. And it basically gives you extra recognition as a contractor that you're part of this credentialed program with some oversight involved. And so it's basically a business choice. And so it's good for you regardless of whether you do Energy Star or not. You have to have it to work on Energy Star homes right now until this new HVAC rating standard is up and running. But there's, even after that point, even when you don't have to be credentialed to work on Energy Star homes, I think it still reflects your commitment to quality. And so it's something you might want to consider.
Yeah, as more and more, as more and more cities, especially down in the Houston area, we're having, that indoor air quality and mold problems. I think any way you can differentiate yourself as a more technical, qualified HVAC contractor in today's market, probably the better. Are there any equipment calibration requirements? I guess he's talking about me generally.
Yeah, there are some general HVAC calibration requirements or test instrument calibration requirements built into standard 310. And that's something that we're going to continue to refine and improve after the standard is out the door. That's an issue that affects like raters, regardless of whether they're doing this standard or other standards. So your blower door that you're using and your duct blaster that you're using, they all have to be calibrated as well. So RESNET, the organization that kind of oversees the home energy raters, is working on improving the language around that.
Okay. Does Energy Star QA QC their providers?
So RESNET is the one that is the oversight organization for both raters and providers. So they're the ones that are responsible for the quality assurance of our program. Today, they're the only entity that's doing that. So that's like the short answer. They oversee both raters and providers.
Do you give RESNET any guidance, or you just let them run it how they wish?
We have an application with certain requirements in it that any oversight organization has to meet. There's a fair amount of flexibility in it, but there are some basic stipulations that they have to meet.
Okay. It says bedroom comfort vents. Can you use a return in each bedroom instead?
Yeah, that's great. That's probably one of the best ways to do it. Usually a lot of builders are looking for a slightly less design intensive option. But what we've heard most often is that builders have kind of settled on at least putting a dedicated return in a master bedroom because they really want to make sure that their customers who are paying the mortgage are happy. And they might use a transfer grill or a jump duct in the other bedrooms because they tend to be a little bit easier to install and a little bit cheaper. But if you can do a dedicated return in every bedroom, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's one of a laundry list of things. If I ever fall off the wagon and become a code official again, will be minimum code in my jurisdiction. It's just not that expensive, and it solves so many problems. It just doesn't make any sense to not, in my opinion. And thanks so much, Dean. I mean, we are right on time, even after the 10 questions. So they're really well done. You can see his email there, everyone. And just for the participants on the call, you will get a PDF of the presentation along with the course evaluation. Again, fill out the course evaluation for your ICCCUs. Any parting words or anything else before we call it a day, Dean?
I just want to thank everyone for their time and for their interest in this. We're really excited about the potential this brings to really continue transforming the HVAC installation world. It's good for everyone involved. So thanks for learning a little bit more about it.
Yeah, no, I've been preaching the right size gospel for forever. I'm a big fan of Energy Star, so we certainly do what we can at Spear to help promote the program and teach the right way to do these things. And really well done. With that, we'll go ahead and call it a day. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Okay. We'll be back next week with a couple more webinars, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again, Dean.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks, Jason. Bye.